Hello, welcome to Unspoken History. My name is Keisha. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to be talking about several different things, mostly focusing on um, the Mongols being in America. And the reason I want to talk about that is because we have these other people here called Native Americans. Um, I, I really can't tell you because they don't look nothing like the original Native Americans. Well, some of them don't, others do. But these Asiatic people were in America long before colonization, but they were invaders too. So the black and brown copper colored people were already in America. They've always been here. They didn't migrate from anywhere. This is their home. Um, and so all of this stuff that's going on, um, the whole idea of setting up the Kim Wong Art case and deporting an Asian person when Asian people were already here. So it's so much confusion that you got to take your time. If this is your first time ever hearing about anything other than what you learned in school, this could be very traumatizing to hear the first time that your whole history is a lie, that everything was fabricated. But why? Well, there's a greater picture. There's a bigger picture. There's a spiritual war that's going on that they don't tell you about, right? Because what is spirituality? That's just something for weak people, right? Weak-minded people. That's what spirituality is for. People that are weak. So, yeah, if you are weak, then you need spirituality. Well, at the same time, while you running away from spirituality, they're back there digging into it to find more ways to keep you from knowing the truth. So, I'm going to talk about Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire and Prester John. So, there are some old maps out. I wish I had some, but they're very expensive. Whenever there is something that can reveal what the truth is to anyone, that book is so expensive. $5,000, $6,000. How many people gonna buy that? Not many. But there's maps out that have a totally different America. China is over here. This was it Asia Major, Asia Minor, or India Minor? Anyway, there were many different names that were put on America before colonization. But when the colonizers came, they wanted to recreate the story and tell you and write themselves into it, I guess. You know, I'm not sure because I'm not going to try to figure out why people lie. Okay? I'm not going to try to figure that out. But I know who the father of lies is. So if you are a liar, like that is what you do, then the prince of lies is your father. And so you're never going to tell the truth. So God is going to have to reveal the truth to us. And that's what he's doing. It's just coming out a little bit by little bit. We just got to pay attention, but it's coming out. So there was a story told about a man called Prester John. His story was like a legend, like a fairy tale legend of this wonderful place with all of these different kind of creatures and animals and whatnot. And he was writing a story about, to a king in Europe because he needed help with the Mongol horde. Now, if the Mongols didn't invade Mexico until the 13th century, so how is it that Prester John wrote about Genghis Khan in the 11th century? Sorry, in the first, what would that be called? The 10th century? It was 1100s. Okay. All right. So this Prester person writes this letter and no one can find where he was. And therefore, they say there was somebody made the story up. There's some stuff you just can't make up. Your imagination is not going to come up with that. Okay, nobody made it up. If you look in other places, when you're researching the Mongol Empire and its ties, then you see the story of Prester John in the Mongol Empire story because um, it's part of the Mongol Empire story, right? But Prester John they still place him over in the Middle East somewhere. Okay. All of world history did not happen in the Middle East, in Europe. Europe's not even a continent. It's a couple states that are close together, connected to a whole nother landmass. So how's that a continent? Anyway, so Prester John became a fairy tale, and then the Mongol Empire story was just left out of history. So we wouldn't know about either one of them. So anyway, this is the early years of Genghis Khan. Temujin, later Genghis Khan, was born around 1162 near the border between modern Mongolia and Siberia. And let me say this. We can't really, I mean, I can give you dates, but I'm sure they're not right. I can tell you locations, and then we know where those locations are right now. But before colonization, the locations were different. Okay? Yeah. That whole Middle East area, it's been messed with. Egypt, all of that, it's been messed with. So they can recreate the story. Why would agents of Satan tell you the truth about the Most High or about Jesus or about how you can be redeemed? Why would they tell you that? They're not going to tell you the truth. And any church that is a church in America is basically a Catholic church. That's what you are. No matter what you think you are, you're Catholic. Okay? You had to get your approval from them to be considered a church and not a cult. I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to get in trouble. So, you're Protestant or you're protesting like we do in the streets when something is unfair or not right. You're protesting. You're just a Protestant Catholic church. That's it. So they don't want this real story to be told, right? The Catholic Church has a story for us, how things went, and that's what everybody has to follow, right? Everybody in the world is participating in covering up the truth, not the regular people like you know, the regular people. I'm talking about the leaders. The regular people are caught in it. Yep. It is your leaders, your prophets, your teachers, your pastors, your that's lying to you, that's leading you astray, that's leading us astray. Until you get control of your own understanding and you start seeking the Lord for yourself, you're gonna stay in this combobulated mess. Okay? So Prester John was a real person. Genghis Khan was a real person. And they have a history. We just need to find it and then put the stories back together. And when you put the stories back together, you'll see that America is the old world and there's nothing new about it. Okay? So it said he was born around 1162 near the border between Mongolia and Siberia. Legend holds that he came into the world clutching a blood clot in his right hand. His mother had been kidnapped by his father and forced into marriage. At that time, dozens of nomadic tribes on the Central Asian steppe were constantly fighting and stealing from each other. And life for Temujin was violent and unpredictable. Before he turned 10, his father was poisoned to death by an enemy clan. Temujin's own clan then deserted him. His mother and his six siblings, excuse me, deserted him, his mother, and his six siblings in order to avoid having to feed them. Mm. Shortly thereafter, Temujin killed his older half brother and took over as head of the poverty stricken household. At one point, he was captured and enslaved by the clan that had abandoned him, but he was eventually able to escape. In 1178, Temujin married Bort, with whom he would have 4 sons and an unknown number of daughters. He launched a daring rescue of Bort after she was kidnapped, and he soon began making alliances, building a reputation as warrior and attracting and growing numbers of followers. Most of what we know about Genghis Khan's childhood comes from the secret history of the Mongols, the oldest known work of Mongolian history and literature, which was written soon after his death. Now, if people hadn't hidden things, when the invaders are coming, go start hiding things and burying things, boy, but the Lord know how to preserve the truth. We don't have to worry. The truth will come to light. That's a promise. It says the Mongol leader Genghis Khan never allowed anyone to paint his portrait, sculpt his image, or engrave his likeness on a coin. The first image of him appeared after his death. Okay, it says Genghis Khan unites the Mongols. Going against custom, Temujin put competent allies rather than relatives in key positions and executed the leaders of enemy tribes while incorporating the remaining members of his clan. He ordered that all looting wait until after the complete victory had been won, and he organized his warriors into units of 10 without regard to kin. Though Temujin was an animist, his followers included Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists. By 1205, he had vanquished all rivals, including his former best friend, Jamuka. The following year, he called a meeting of representatives from every part of the territory and established a nation similar in size to modern Mongolia. He was also proclaimed Genghis Khan, which roughly, that's Chinggis Khan, which roughly translates to, translates to universal ruler, a name that became known in the West as Genghis Khan. Okay, I just wanted to do a little backstory on Genghis real quick, and then let me see what else I got here. So basically, when you do the research on the Mongol conquest, it shows you Asia, it tells you Japan, it tells you Baghdad, it tells you all of these other places, but never mentions America. Just saying. The work that it takes to sift through, looking at this article, looking at that article. Oh, found a little piece here, found a little piece there. It's exhausting. Okay. Um, It says the earliest evidence of Islam in Mongolia is dated to 1254, when the Franciscan William Rubric visited the court of the great Khan Munka. It was Munga at Karakorum. He celebrated Easter at a Nestorian Christian church, but also noted 7 temples of idolers, possibly Buddhist, Hindu, and Taoist temples. One of the idolers, temples and 2 mosques. Therefore, historians dated the arrival of Islam to Mongolia to between 1222 and 1254. Islam also gained the notice of the Mongols after Genghis Khan invaded Afghanistan. It was believed he inquired about Islam and subsequently approved of Islam's tenets, except the Hajj, that is a travel back to what they used to call a pilgrimage to Mecca, which they used to call the Holy Land. And that was, so that area I keep looking up at this map, I'm sorry, I keep thinking y'all can see it. But the area where they have Jerusalem at now, that little strip, it used to be called the Holy Land, right? That was the Holy Land for Islam, not the Holy Land for Israelites. Okay, so he did not require people to go on a pilgrimage back to Mecca for prayer, considering it unnecessary. Nevertheless, he continued his worship of Tingri as his ancestors had done. So he kept his own religion. He allowed people to do what they wanted. Okay, so that is, hold on a second. I was going to read something else here, I think. Yeah, I read that. Genghis Khan converted. Okay, Genghis Khan's grandson Berke converted to Islam due to the efforts of Shauf Dun Dervish, a dervish from Khorasan. Thus, Berke became one of his first Mongol rulers to convert. Other Mongol leaders owed their conversion to Islam due to the influence of a Muslim wife. Later, it was a Mamluk ruler who played an important role in bringing many Golden Horde Mongols to Islam. So, this is interesting. Very interesting. So, when now I understand why Genghis never totally, like, them in Islam never like really fought. Like, it was more like merging, right? As a group. Because I want to say it was, oh, I can't think that these names are hard to pronounce. It was the people, the Moors that were in Egypt. What were they called? Ooh, sorry guys. Um, Let me see if it's in here. No, no. Okay, I'm done with that one. Um, where? Okay. All right. Let's see what National Geographic has to say. And see the other thing too, if I'm not looking at information that is specifically Mongol history, you're not gonna get this stuff. They're gonna say they invaded this one and that one and this one and that one, and never include America or how they became Islamic, how they started following Islam. All right, so let me get to the story on America. Now that you got the backstory, so basically there is still colonized bias in this publication, right? Because they're saying there was nobody over there, there was no people there. Well, you don't know just because you haven't been there. That don't mean that there was nobody there. Okay, so a lot of the history that was written by, or that was co-opted, redone by white European writers and artists, they were writing that just for themselves, right? To make themselves feel good. Yeah, this is that. This person looked like that. This, that. Yeah, we did this. We did that. This is all European. Well, whatever. Okay. I hope it made y'all feel good back then because it sure don't feel good to your descendants to know that everything is a lie. Okay. In the year 15 set, in the year set, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sitting there looking. Am I dyslexic? In the year 1257, I was going to say 752, 17, or whatever. In the year 1257 of the Christian era, Kublai's grandson, Kublai, grandson of Genghis Khan, on the death of his brother, Mengu, was proclaimed Grand Khan. Anyway, at the conquest of eastern Bengal and all of the provinces east of the Burrampooter, he captured numerous elephants and subjected many sovereigns to deliver to him many of those animals as a part of their tribute. And from the year 1272, always employed elephants in his army. We find from Marco Polo that he possessed 5,000 of these animals at the period we now treat of. The war in which the emperor was engaged before his attempt on Japan were those in Manji or South China, and against his rebellious relation in Siberia. So that whole area over there, Siberia, that must have been that area over there in Russia, China, all of that, the Middle East. He went from where he was in Siberia all the way to the other side of that continent. In the year 1280, in a most terrible conflict by land and sea. Now remember, in 1280, the Moors were still in Spain. They didn't start expelling, well, I'm sure the war started before 1492, but at the same time that they were colonizing America, they were expelling the Moors and Israelites from Europe. So this was when the Moors were still in power, when Genghis was coming across. Okay. So it's interesting that there aren't very many, there aren't any wars mentioned between the Mongols and Islam or in the Muslims. In the year 1280, in a most terrible conflict by land and sea at Canton, the imperial family of the Song dynasty were destroyed, on which Kublai became master of all China and first emperor of the Qing dynasty under the name Shitsu. At this epoch, Kublai was in possession of a more extensive domination and infinitely greater numbers of subjects than were ever controlled by any monarch recorded in history. His empire began much more considerable than that of Augustus. The continent of Asia, except Hindustan and Arabia, were under his sway. Okay, that's just about all of it. Of him, it may be said with more truth than the British king is made to say of Caesar. His ambition swelled so much that it did almost stretch the sides of the world. As soon as Kublai found himself possessed of the whole power of the Chinese empire, he resolved on the conquest of Japan and gave orders to his subjects of Kangnan, Fukien, Honan, and Changtong to construct 600 vessels. Okay. The Emperor Sitsu, which is Kublai, and in the third year of his reign, formed a design against Japan. He sent 100,000 men to invade it, but the expedition proved very unfortunate. Sorry. All the rest were either shipwrecked or perished in the neighboring islands. The Japanese Emperor Guda succeeded his father in AD 1275. In the ninth year of his reign, on the 21st day of the fifth month, the Tartar general Muku appeared upon the coast of Japan with a fleet of 4,000 sail and 240,000 men. Wow, that's a lot of people on boats. But this expedition proved unsuccessful. The kami or gods and protectors of the Japanese empire were so increased at the insult offered them by the Tartars that on the first day of the seventh month they excited a violent and dreadful storm which destroyed all this reputed invincible armada. Did it just say they used magic to cause a storm? It said they incited a violent and dreadful storm. How? How did they create a storm? Do you believe in magic? Okay. A dreadful storm which destroyed all this reputed invincible armada. Muku himself perished in the waves, and but few of his men escaped. For the conquest of Japan, the Grand Khan fitted out a numerous fleet and embarked a large body of troops under the command of Abakatan and Venetian is Van Sensen. The expedition sailed to Zetum and Kenai and reached the island in safety. The two commanders, from jealousy, treated each other's plans with contempt. So they finna start arguing and fighting amongst each other. They were unable to gain possession of any city or fortified place except one which was carried by assault, and all the garrisons were put to the sword. Sometime afterward, a north wind began to blow with great force, and the ship of the Tartars, which lay near the shore of the island, were driven foul of each day. They held a council, re-embarked their troops, and stood out, and stood out, and stood out to sea. The gale increased, and the number of the vessels foundered. The people belonging to them by the gale increased, and a number of vessels floundered. The people belonging to them, by floating upon pieces of wrecks, saved themselves upon an island about 4 miles from the coast of Japan. Mm, mm, mm. The ships on which the two chiefs and those officers whose ranks entitled them to be command of hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands of men were embarked, together with many others, not being so near the land, did not suffer from the storm. These directed their course homeward and returned to the Grand Khan.